tell you why I think gated communities are awful. Gated communities are residential communities. They have these strictly controlled entrances, and they often use fences or walls to prevent people from coming in from the outside. They don't want anyone entering their territory. So let's discuss both the pros and the cons of gated communities. And then I will tell you why I don't like the idea of gated communities. Hi, I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education. The prevalence of gated communities has risen steadily across the United States since the 1960s, and firm numbers are actually pretty hard to come by, but recent census figures tell us that somewhere between 6 million and 9 million Americans live in gated communities. That number is growing. Yes, people living behind gates. I'm going to focus on the United States. In fact, my recent trip to Las Vegas, where I stayed for a while, tempers this because they have a lot of gated communities. In California, 40% of new homes are now put behind walls. And gates are pretty nearly worldwide. Last year, I visited India. There are gated communities on the outskirts of Mumbai and New Delhi. Pakistan has an awful lot of gates. I've made 2 trips to the Philippines where there are a ton of gated communities in the Philippines. Both Guayaquil and Quito, Ecuador have a lot of gated communities. I'm going to be there in 2 weeks checking those out. Gated communities generally have higher end homes behind them, but not always. In fact, you can even find a trailer park that's a gated community, but more of them tend to be those McMansion type of properties. So it's not always exclusive homes that are there. Hey, go ahead and put a like on this if you would. If you like that I'm talking about the pros and the cons of gated communities. We're going to view it through that lens. You're going to get my opinion on why I dislike gated communities, and then you're going to have a chance to interact at the end. Let's talk about the pros, the pluses, the upsides of living in a gated community. There is added security. Most people are attracted to gated communities because they give people this sense of security. People feel like living behind gates keeps unwanted guests out of their neighborhood, and criminal activity is usually lower in these neighborhoods. Most people love that there is less traffic behind gates so that their family can run and play without worry. One thing that people love about this added sense of privacy is that there are not as many solicitors going door to door trying to sell them something. Depending on which community you live in, it can be almost impossible to get through the gates. Some communities are quite a bit more relaxed than others, while some have human guards where each car needs to stop before proceeding. A lot of others just have a code that you punch in order to get in through the gate, oftentimes when you're using your car to get in there. But yeah, there is much less traffic. Whether there is a guard or a keypad, this restricted access, it keeps random traffic from coming through the gates, and neighbors and their guests are usually the only drivers on the roads in these gated communities. So yeah, that does mean kids get to play outside more and enjoy this relative peace and quiet of the roads. Another pro, a plus and upside to gated communities is you typically have a higher standard of home quality. Most people living in a gated community, they don't worry about their neighbor painting their house bright pink. And the standard of home quality is high because they often have strict building codes in the uniform design. Oftentimes, it's going to be an HOA, a homeowners association in a gated community. And most homeowners, they keep a high pride of ownership. Not all neighbors are the same. So you might have some neighbors that still try to keep an unkempt yard, and they might have the HOA fines that go along with it. Most homeowners are held to a higher standard, so they take pretty good care of their home. You tend to have homeowners more often than not behind gates, not rentals. And of course, you can still have an HOA, a homeowners association, without any gates. In fact, I live in a community like that that has a pretty light HOA, no gate, no wall to get in. Homes in gated communities tend to have higher property values. The HOA dues are higher, but you can see this as a pro because it gives a higher value to that property overall. So the entire look of the community, even though it's uniform, it's usually pretty visually appealing, but it takes more money to maintain a gated neighborhood. And you can say that there's a social benefit to living in a gated community. There's a drawback as well. We'll discuss that shortly. But gated communities, they often have a bunch of amenities for the entire community. Oftentimes, you're going to find a clubhouse and a pool, and some have a golf course or even special events just for that community. And these promote group activities, so really everyone in that gated community feels like they can get to know each other. You might feel a closer connection to your neighbors that way. And since there is less traffic, more children ride their bikes through the streets and they get out to play with each other. And each neighborhood will have its own group that puts together these events for the community. Like I said, I was recently in Las Vegas. I was also visiting Henderson, Nevada, which is basically a Las Vegas suburb. I talked to a mother that lives in a gated community, and her overall opinion was she likes living there because she feels like it's safer for her two young sons. So in her mind, living in a gated community is overall a positive. Hey, go ahead and put a like on this if you would. I discussed the pros of living in a gated community. We're going to talk about the cons and why overall I don't like gated communities. I'd really appreciate the like. When it comes to the cons, it's the well-known musician John Mayer that said, "I don't want to detach. I don't want to go live in a gated community." Yeah, I feel largely the same way that John Mayer does. 2 months ago, I was traveling through Alabama. When it was time for me to get gas, I specifically stopped at a truck stop and then ate lunch on a picnic table outside so I could talk to and mingle with Alabama truckers as they were coming in and talk to them about inflation and things like that. And it gives me a chance to talk to people that are nothing like me. I really appreciate that kind of diversity that oftentimes you're not going to get in a gated community. A drawback to living in a gated community is oftentimes you have to wait to get in to where your own home is. And a lot of people don't even think about what sometimes can be a long line outside the gate just to get access into where they can drive to their own home. At times, yeah, there is a line at the guardhouse as they check people in. And if you're new to the community and don't have credentials yet, it can be even longer as they might have to do some research to make sure that you are the actual homeowner. If you have guests or repair people coming into your neighborhood, they're going to have a tough time waiting as they're going to be checked in as well. And remember, you need to add any guests to most neighborhood lists. Sometimes there are even visiting hours applied to contractors and workers that might be coming over to your home. Waiting is just going to be part of living in a gated community. Sometimes it's easy to get in. Other times you're going to have to wait in a line to get into your own neighborhood. Every time you have a family member or a friend visit, you're going to have to go inform the guard just so that they can gain entrance. So if your family loves hosting company and relatives and family friends and people that are frequent house guests, you might grow frustrated with the gate logistics over time. On that recent visit to Henderson, Nevada, I visited a few families that live behind gates. They're friends of ours. And I had to get the gate code. And okay, once I felt confident with the gate code and about that protocol, then sometimes outside the gate, I would learn, oh, I actually can't get in the gate with the 4-digit code because, oh, the homeowner forgot to tell me I need to press star and then the 4-digit gate code. And over at a different community, oh, they didn't tell me I have to press pound over there before the 4-digit gate code. And it causes logistical problems as I'm waiting outside and we're exchanging texts back and forth as I'm trying to get in. So it's really frustrating as a guest. Municipal planning laws in a lot of Canadian provinces ban locked gates on public roads as a health issue because they deny emergency vehicles access. You think you feel safer in a gated community? What if an ambulance or medical attention cannot get in a quick fashion? Some gated communities even make commercial services ordered by the residents pay a gate fee as high as $20 or $30, and these fees inevitably get passed on to the homeowner. Contractors are not usually required to pay a fee to get to their clients, so the responsibility rightly falls on the resident. Criminals can get the code from the pizza guy. What about access for Amazon or UPS or Uber Eats? And yeah, there are some built-in workarounds for some of these, but it just causes more problems that way. Then there are the HOA fees. If you're living in a community behind gates, expect your homeowners association fees to be fairly high. And if you have a guard, you'll be paying more since there are different shifts for the human guards. Your fees also pay for the landscaping and roads and community amenities and overall maintenance in a lot of these communities. So you should expect to add a few $100s to your bill each month. HOAs can be both good and bad, because on one hand, they keep the neighborhood looking top-notch, but on the other hand, they're often expensive and annoying. Get ready to be fined for every little thing around your home that isn't following the code's covenants and restrictions perfectly. So as a gated community resident, you're paying more money and you're paying for it taking more time in exchange for your safety. Is that worth it? That's only a question you can answer. Is that worth it? You know, a lot of trade-offs in society are really a trade-off between safety and freedom. And that's what I see as going on in a gated community. Not to say what's right or wrong, but a vaccine mandate, all right, that's a trade-off between safety and freedom. Your stable job, if you don't like it, if you're not passionate about it, you keep showing up because it feels safe. Well, again, that's the opposite of freedom. So a lot of things are a trade-off between safety and freedom. That's how I see gated communities. You need to understand that gates cannot absolutely stop crime. Oftentimes it's a deterrent, but if a criminal wants to get into your neighborhood, they will find a way in. The gates and the guards are a deterrent. They're just not a solution. There can still be crime even behind the gates. So it's important to be vigilant and alert even when you do live behind gates. I mean, you could be burglarized by your next door neighbor, especially if they have teenagers. So there is a lower incidence of crime, but crime is not removed. Lack of growth can be pretty limiting. There are usually lots of architectural guidelines put forth by the HOA in these communities, so that means once a community's filled, all the homes look about the same and you really can't do much to grow and expand. So the appearance is appealing to some, but others, they just want more character in their home. And once homes grow and reach the boundaries of the gates, it's all done expanding. So that does make the neighborhood more inclusive. That's a pro for some, but for others, they want a larger and more diverse community. I guess you can call it a con in the fact that the homes tend to be more expensive. They tend to be for the affluent. They're going to be higher priced homes than homes without gates in general. So buyers usually pay a premium for these homes due to the security and the extra measures that are needed to maintain a community like this. So on top of your HOA fees each month, you're probably going to plan on having a pretty hefty mortgage payment as well. You're paying extra for guards in some communities, the private security and the extra upkeep. But really, there are limited opportunities for a financial return in gated communities. The rules and regulations, they often lead to limited opportunity for things like the rules with regard to paint color and yards and tenants and gatherings and even fences. So this means if you want to use these homes for rental income, you might not even be able to do that. You cannot add special parts onto a lot of these homes, so that's why you might not get the financial return. And many of the Las Vegas gated communities like I just visited, they are on golf courses, or a lot of them overlook really beautiful scenery. We're talking about neighborhoods like Canyon Gate and Spanish Trails and Anthem Country Club there near the southern part of Las Vegas, and Rhodes Ranch. They're just a few of the communities that sit behind closed gates. So gated communities, they kind of churn a vicious cycle by attracting these like-minded residents that seek shelter from outsiders. So this physical seclusion, it kind of worsens this paranoid groupthink against outsiders. And that's a big reason why generally I don't like to see gated communities. Now, you got to understand, even if you don't live in a gated community, neighbors are often going to be pretty similar to you anyway, but there does tend to be a little more diversity. In fact, I have a next door neighbor, husband and wife. One of the two spouses happens to be a teacher, and they were telling me how they got these COVID stimulus checks. And I mean, that's just not part of my world. Luckily, my income is higher than that. But that was interesting to hear the perspective of someone somewhat different than me. The more walled in I am, the less freedom and the more safety I have, the less diversity there is, the less likely I am to have those types of conversations. I mean, wouldn't you just like to have the freedom of knowing, depending on where you live, maybe some wildlife could even roam into your yard? That's a possibility where I live. So if this is truly the land of the free, why live behind a wall? And I am just the type of person that champions ideals like freedom. I tend to be an optimist and a consensus builder because I really value things in people like openness and truth and accessibility. Gated communities do not play into that. So what do you think? Do you like gated communities or do you dislike them? And go ahead and leave a comment. Tell me about that. And also tell me why or why not. about your opinion with gated communities, and it is completely okay to disagree with me. Understand that I have never lived in a gated community. As close as I've come is I have rented Airbnb dwellings, and I have stayed in them for a week or two that are inside a gated community. So that is my perspective. But yeah, leave a comment, engage with me, tell me, do you like or dislike gated communities and why? And especially if you do currently live or have ever lived in a gated community, I'd really value your commentary and input, and who knows, maybe it could even help change my thinking on gated communities. Those are the pros, those are the cons, that's why I dislike them. Go ahead and leave a comment. Do you like gated communities or not? I'd really appreciate interacting. I'm Keith Weinhold. We'll see you in the next video.